To Chairman Thomas, Vice Chair Swearingen, Ranking Member Sinnenberg, and members of the House Judiciary Committee, thank you for this opportunity to provide opponent testimony on House Bill 249. My name is Gary Daniels, Legislative Director for the ACLU of Ohio. I'm going to go off script here, given how the hearing has gone so far. In my written testimony there, you will see plenty of reference to the problems overall that are repeated with House Bill 249 with indecency and obscenity laws. When I previously testified on this bill last session, some members were incredulous that anybody would have a problem with indecency or obscenity laws the way they are written, despite decades of scholarship about the exact problems with these laws, the words of U.S. Supreme Court justices, the words of judges, both conservative and liberal across the political spectrum, conferences, law review articles about this exact problem that are, again, repeated here in House Bill 249. The overall problems with that type of language, when you look at the actual law, when it talks about describing or representing sexual conduct or sexual excitement, when it talks about what's patently offensive to prevailing standards in the adult community as a whole with respect to what is suitable for juveniles, obscenity law, when it talks about judging with reference to ordinary adults, these types of terms and phrases that are very subjective and open to interpretation. And it's exactly why these types of laws have been used over the decades to target movies, TV shows, websites, video games, records, and recorded music and everything else. Now, with the remainder of my testimony, I want to address a couple of things that have been brought up here in committee. Show where the current law is with regard to this particular so-called problem. And other witnesses have said it quite clearly. 2907.31, disseminating matter harmful to juveniles. But you look at the statute itself, and it doesn't apply to just matter. It explicitly says performance as well throughout the law here that we're talking about. So I'm not exactly sure where the confusion lies. The same is true for the pandering obscenity parts of Ohio law, where it specifically references performance, I think demonstrating why this law is unnecessary. With regard to how these key lawsuits against these laws continue to lose in court, that's not true. 4 days ago, the Ninth Circuit upheld an injunction from the district court in Montana, striking down that law. In May 2025, the same was true for a law out of Florida. Yes, there is a Tennessee case where a lawsuit against this type of law was dismissed, but that was based on standing grounds, not on the merits of the law itself. In fact, when the district court looked at the merits, it issued an injunction against the law itself. So you've certainly got lawsuits out there, and there's one other lawsuit I'm aware of with regard to, what state is it? Texas, which is also a case that's currently ping-ponging through the courts right now based on standing issues, not the merits of the law itself. So, that's just to correct the record here based on some claims that were made that I find to be, at the very least inaccurate.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Representative Timms with a question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for coming to testify today. I know there was a lot mentioned about the Sixth Circuit and what happened with that case and how they defined it. There's also a decision by the Ninth Circuit just a few days ago about another House bill in Montana. Can you talk a little bit about the conflicting decisions between both courts and what that means for, I guess, the veracity of this bill?
Through the chair to Representative Timms, what I haven't done is a deep dive on exactly how those state laws differ from or are similar to Ohio's, but they all stand for the general proposition that you need to limit, you need to restrict, if not ban altogether, drag shows. And I think, when you look at it from a 30,000-foot view, these lawsuits, these laws are very much the same. But I'm aware of 4 lawsuits in 4 different states. 2 of them decided on the merits, including the example out of Montana that you mentioned and I mentioned in my testimony. So 2, striking down these laws based on the underlying merits of what the law itself it says, and then 2 that are currently bogged down on standing issues. That is where people have gone in and sued facial challenge to the lawsuit itself, which many courts don't like, understandably. These weren't as applied challenges. That is where somebody has been prosecuted as a result, and you have a real live actual controversy, how that law has been applied to those people. So, the idea that well, these laws keep getting upheld across the country, but that's not true.
Thank you. So I believe the Ninth Circuit in their decision held that the bill failed, or sponsors failed to prove that it harms children. Do you have any data or statistics or reports that you could share with the committee about the alleged harm or lack thereof in regards to this? And so I guess in support of what the Ninth Circuit said, and I'm not sure if there were any amicus briefs filed.
Yeah. Through the chair to Representative Timms, I'm sorry I do not have that level of information, including what the ACLU might have said in regard to those particular cases. But one thing is crystal clear, as I said. If this is what concerns the supporters of this bill or this committee, this overall issue, you have 2 laws, at least 2 laws, that explicitly target this type of behavior that people has been mentioning as a concern. Disseminating matter harmful to juveniles, 2907.31, and pandering obscenity, 2907.32, both of which, again, specifically, explicitly reference performances.
Any other questions for the witness? Vice Chair Swearingen with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One question, again, I think we've seen in numerous instances where the government has an interest in protecting those under the age of 18. Again, smoking, cannabis, alcohol, strip clubs, requiring kids to go to school or else they're truant. I mean, there's numerous laws where the government steps in. Does the ACLU agree that in certain instances, and I'm not even saying this specifically, but in certain instances, the government can protect those under the age of 18?
Through the chair to Vice Chair Swearingen, well, of course, government can legitimately pass laws that protect children in a wide range of circumstances, including those you mentioned. But I suppose part of what this all boils down to is how skeptical one is of government. The core of civil liberties is being at least skeptical of the government and what the government does. And here, where you have a set of laws, obscenity laws, indecency laws, harmful to juveniles laws that have been used time and time again to target, again, movies, books, classic literature, TV shows, recorded music, comic books, video games, it's hard to believe that at some point in some city, in some county, this vague language and the vague standards found in the current law will not be turned on drag queens and drag performers, because after all, that's the purpose of the bill. The bill is unneeded. The behavior that people are already talking about and say they're concerned about is specifically covered under at least 2 areas of Ohio law.
Follow up?
I understand you pointing out those statutes, and I think Rep. Williams mentioned them earlier. Again, I think, if it's duplicative, it cuts both ways, right? If it's already as it is now, then what's the concern? If this law is duplicative, and I understand it could be a waste of time, resources, et cetera, I get that. But if it's duplicative and nothing's changing, then what's the issue?
Through the chair to the vice chair, I think the overall issue is that it's such a shame that we're wasting time doing this. I know it's not a popular thing to say, but you see this every year and a half, every 2 years. You see a wave of culture war bills just before the primaries to get everybody worked up about particular issues, and this is the latest one of several currently under consideration.
Any other questions for the witness? Ranking Member Sonnenberg with a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And Mr. Daniels, thank you for your time and testimony today. I want to touch on something that has not been brought up yet, which we can go back and forth on. Is this duplicative? Is this not? But the very fact that we are in here, all of us today, spending our time and resources, and all of the opponents who are here, it inevitably here, I'll be blunt. We're losing people in the state. Economically, economic development, you go to the Rhodes Tower right here on Broad Street, and there's a statute of Governor Rhodes, and it's all about how Ohio is supposed to be jobs friendly. Profit is not a dirty word in Ohio. The only ills that come to man are because of a lack of a job. Okay, those are on that statute right there. And can you explain maybe from your experience, maybe whether there's data or anecdotally, how just the fact that we're in this room having this discussion, whether or not the bill passes, doesn't pass, gets held up in the Senate, whatever, the fact that this is happening right now, the kind of anti-economic environment it creates for people who, whether or not they are members of the LGBTQ community, do not want to live in a state that is even having this debate.
Through the chair to Ranking Member Sonnenberg, I certainly can't speak on behalf of other people. I can only answer that question anecdotally. But, I know people, I'm sure other people in this room know people, perhaps it's them themselves, that either won't move to Ohio or they move out of Ohio because of what they see. This one bill alone, I'm sure for some people it would do it. Other people, I think it's a collection of things, spokes in the same wheel, for instance. And you can look bigger and better beyond that. I mean, the fact that in Ohio it is still entirely illegal to discriminate under state law against LGBT people in public accommodations and in housing and employment, that right there is a very big issue, real issue for an awful lot of people. So, in a vacuum, you've got this bill, but you've got an awful lot of other similar stuff going on that does push some people out of Ohio and cause them not to come here. And I think that's probably the intention of some supporters of bills like these.
Any other questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.